In a world where almost everyone shares everything, some people choose not to post at all. No updates, no stories, no explanations. And that silence often gets misunderstood. People assume it means insecurity, isolation, or that something is wrong. But Stoicism invites a different question. What kind of mind doesn't need to be seen to feel real? Not everyone who stays silent is withdrawn. Many are simply uninterested in turning their life into a performance. They don't document every moment. They don't measure their worth in likes. They don't feel the need to prove that they exist. Instead, they live inwardly anchored. The ancient Stoics warned about external validation long before social media existed. They understood that the more your identity depends on being observed, the less stable it becomes. This video is not about rejecting social media, and it's not about claiming moral superiority. It's about understanding the psychology of people who don't post, and what their silence often reveals about self-control, attention, and inner strength. By the end of this video, you'll see silence differently, not as absence, but as intention. Let's begin. 1. They don't seek external validation. One of the clearest psychological traits of people who don't post on social media is not arrogance. It's independence from external validation. They don't feel the urge to broadcast their thoughts, achievements, or emotions to confirm that they matter. Not because they think they're above it, but because their sense of worth isn't waiting for a response. Most people don't realize how much of their identity is quietly tied to feedback. Likes become reassurance. Views become relevance. Comments become a form of emotional regulation. The Stoics warned about this long before screens existed. They understood that when your sense of self depends on being acknowledged, your inner stability becomes fragile. People who don't post often operate from a different center. Their self-worth is internal. Their confidence is quiet. Their identity doesn't rise or fall based on how others react. This doesn't mean they don't care about people. It means they don't outsource their value to an audience. From a Stoic perspective, this is not withdrawal. It's self-command. They know the difference between being seen and being grounded. And because they don't need constant affirmation, their emotions tend to move more slowly. Less reactivity, less comparison, less pressure to keep up appearances. In a culture that rewards visibility, choosing not to post is often misunderstood. But psychologically, it can signal something rare, a person who knows who they are without needing witnesses. And that kind of stability is becoming increasingly uncommon. 2. They protect their inner world. Another defining trait of people who don't post on social media is how deliberately they protect their inner world. They understand something most people overlook. Attention is not unlimited, and where it goes, the mind follows. Social media constantly pulls attention outward, into comparison, reaction, and emotional noise. For some people, that trade simply isn't worth it. They notice how quickly emotions shift after scrolling, how easily other people's opinions enter their thinking, how subtly the mind becomes reactive instead of intentional. So they choose restraint, not because they fear engagement, but because they value clarity. From a Stoic perspective, this is discipline, not avoidance. The Stoics believed that a calm mind requires selective engagement with the world. You don't open the door to every sound. You don't respond to every stimulus. You don't allow every impression to settle inside you. People who don't post often operate this way. They share less publicly, but process more privately. They reflect before reacting. They think before expressing. They are slower to broadcast emotion and quicker to examine it. This creates a different internal rhythm, less urgency, less comparison, less emotional exhaustion. In a culture where constant visibility is normalized, this can look like detachment. But psychologically, it often signals something else. a person who knows that peace is easier to protect than to repair. And once someone learns how fragile attention is, they become far more careful about where they place it. 3. They separate identity from performance. People who don't post on social media often make a clear psychological distinction that many others don't. They separate who they are from what they display. Their life is not a performance. Their experiences are not content. Their identity does not depend on presentation. In contrast, social media quietly encourages a different habit. Moments are filtered, experiences are framed. Life becomes something to be shown, not lived. Over time, this blurs the line between being and appearing. The Stoics warned against this long before technology. They believed that when identity becomes performative, character weakens. You begin to act for effect. You adjust behavior for reaction. You measure yourself by how you are perceived. People who don't post resist this pattern, not consciously in most cases, but instinctively. They live first, they experience fully, and only then, if at all, do they speak. From a Stoic perspective, this preserves something essential: integrity. What you do when no one is watching remains more important than what others think they see. Psychologically, this creates stability. There is less pressure to curate an image, less anxiety about consistency, less fear of contradiction. They are allowed to evolve privately. They can change their mind, grow quietly, make mistakes without an audience. In a world that constantly asks, "Who are you online?" they answer a different question: "Who am I when no one is looking?" And that answer tends to be more honest. 4. They value silence over noise. People who don't post on social media are often far more comfortable with silence than most people realize. They don't feel the urge to fill every gap. They don't panic when nothing is happening publicly. They don't confuse quiet with emptiness. Psychologically, this matters. Silence removes distraction, and without distraction, the mind reveals itself. Many people avoid silence because it forces confrontation with unresolved thoughts, unprocessed emotions, and questions they've been postponing. The Stoics understood this well. They saw silence not as withdrawal, but as a tool for clarity. A mind that can sit in stillness is a mind that is not constantly escaping itself. People who don't post often develop this tolerance naturally. They don't need constant stimulation to feel alive. They don't need continuous feedback to feel secure. They don't mistake activity for meaning. Instead, they allow space. Space to think without interruption. Space to feel without immediately reacting. Space to let thoughts pass without turning them into statements. From a Stoic perspective, this is not passivity, it is restraint. Noise demands reaction. Silence allows choice. Psychologically, this creates a slower internal pace, less urgency, less emotional volatility, less pressure to respond to everything. In a world where attention is constantly pulled outward, choosing silence can look unusual, but often it signals something rare: a person who is not afraid of their own mind. And that comfort with silence tends to translate into clarity elsewhere, in decisions, relationships, and direction. 5. They don't need to explain their life. One of the quiet psychological traits of people who don't post on social media is that they don't feel compelled to explain their life. They don't announce what they're doing. They don't justify their choices publicly. They don't narrate their progress for understanding or approval. Not because they're secretive, but because they are internally settled. Many people underestimate how much explanation comes from uncertainty. When you're unsure of your direction, you seek confirmation. When you doubt your choices, you look for reassurance. And social media becomes a place to preempt judgment by controlling the story. The Stoics saw this clearly. They believed that a person grounded in their values does not feel the need to constantly defend or clarify them. Character speaks quietly. Consistency speaks over time. People who don't post often operate this way. They let actions remain private. They allow progress to unfold without commentary. They accept that not everyone needs to understand them. Psychologically, this creates freedom. There is no pressure to maintain a narrative, no need to keep others updated, no anxiety about being misinterpreted in real time. They are not trying to be understood by everyone, only to remain aligned with themselves. From a Stoic perspective, this restraint reflects dignity. The more you explain yourself, the more power you give to the audience. The less you explain, the more responsibility stays with you. This doesn't mean withdrawal from relationships. It means choosing when and to whom your inner life is revealed. In a culture that constantly asks for visibility, this kind of privacy can look unusual. But psychologically, it often signals something stable. A person who trusts their direction doesn't need to narrate it. They move quietly. They let time do the explaining, and that patience is a form of strength. 6. They are oriented toward process, not applause. People who don't post on social media are often oriented toward process, not applause. Their satisfaction comes from doing the work, not from being seen doing it. They don't feel the need to turn progress into proof. They don't pause to document effort. They don't interrupt momentum for recognition. Psychologically, this changes how motivation works. When applause becomes the reward, progress slows the moment attention fades. When process becomes the reward, effort continues quietly, with or without witnesses. The Stoics placed enormous value on this distinction. They believed that the quality of an action matters more than how it appears. Duty over display, consistency over praise. People who don't post often embody this naturally. They work when no one is watching. They improve without announcing it. They let results accumulate instead of performing progress. This creates a different internal incentive structure. Motivation is steadier, disappointment is lower. Ego has less influence over effort. From a psychological perspective, this protects against burnout. When your work is no longer tied to reaction, you don't collapse when recognition is delayed or absent. You continue because the work itself has meaning. In a culture where visibility is rewarded more than substance, this orientation can seem invisible. But invisibility is not the same as insignificance. Often, it signals someone who understands a simple truth. Applause is temporary. Process is permanent. And those who commit to process tend to build something far more durable than attention. 7. They are comfortable being misunderstood. One of the most psychologically telling traits of people who don't post on social media is their comfort with being misunderstood. They don't rush to correct assumptions. They don't clarify every silence. They don't manage perception in real time, not because they don't care, but because they don't feel threatened by incomplete understanding. Most people underestimate how much anxiety comes from reputation management, from trying to be seen correctly, from needing others to get them, from adjusting behavior to avoid misinterpretation. The Stoics viewed this as a subtle form of dependence. When your peace relies on how others perceive you, you give them authority over your inner state. People who don't post often live outside this loop. They accept that. Some people will misread them, some will project onto them, some will never fully understand their choices, and they don't rush to fix it. Psychologically, this signals self-trust. They know who they are. They know why they live the way they do, and they don't need consensus to stay aligned. From a Stoic perspective, this is freedom. You control your actions, not the narratives others build around them. You focus on character, not reputation. This doesn't make someone distant or cold. It makes them stable. Because when misunderstanding no longer feels dangerous, you stop performing clarity for others and start living honestly for yourself. In a culture obsessed with visibility and explanation, this kind of quiet confidence often goes unnoticed. But psychologically, it is one of the clearest signs of an anchored mind. Final reflection: depth over display. Not everyone who avoids social media is strong, and not everyone who posts is insecure. Stoicism doesn't deal in absolutes, but psychology shows us something important. Silence, when chosen intentionally, often reflects self-command rather than absence. People who don't post frequently tend to anchor their worth internally, protect their attention carefully, separate identity from performance. Value silence over noise, move without constant explanation, commit to process over applause, accept being misunderstood. This doesn't make them superior, it makes them independent. The Stoics never taught people to withdraw from the world. They taught them not to be ruled by it. In a time where visibility is mistaken for value, choosing depth over display is a quiet act of discipline. So the question isn't whether you should post or not. The question is simpler and harder. Do you live to be seen, or do you live to be aligned? A Stoic life doesn't need witnesses to be meaningful. It only needs consistency. And that kind of life often speaks loudest without saying much at all.